Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome here to the Kimsey Athletic Center, the home of the For the photo session, each inductee will be sent a CD in the coming weeks with a sampling of the pictures taken here today. Family and friends, welcome to come back tomorrow to take pictures inside this Kenna Hall of Army Sports. We'd like to thank everyone for coming out. At this time, we'd like to recognize the dignitaries with us here this afternoon, the 60th Superintendent of the United States Military Academy, Lieutenant General Darrell Williams, and his wife, Erin. Mr. Drew Corrigan and his wife, Kristen. Distinguished visitors, family members who have come with us today. And how about this? The first Army Sports Hall of Fame class with this trophy behind me. And welcome to the lectern, Director of Intercollegiate Athletics, Drew Corrigan.
Welcome back, particularly to our inductees and to the families of our two inductees who are here with us. And I can assure you they're here with us in what this is and what this means. As you think about what's happening here, one thing I've truly learned in my time with West Point is never one person. Because these are the people that were inducted. But the other people are here with us as well. To help carry that, either to West Point, through West Point, or, or their support system along the way. Whether it's driving them to a practice, when they're 10, 11, 12 years old, consoling them after a loss, or just being there and just standing. Everyone. Think about how special that is. We have had this opportunity today to celebrate these 7 wonderful people. And it's my honor to be here. I told y'all, one thing I remember from my wedding, other than it being the greatest day of my life. One thing I remember from my wedding is someone told me before. It said, at some point during the reception, step back and look at how much fun everyone's having. And they're having fun because they're celebrating you. So thank you all for celebrating.
At this time, I'm going to welcome each inductee to come to the lectern individually for a few words. We start with a 3-sport athlete, the National College Basketball Player of the Year, and later head football coach from the class of 1945, Dale Stanley Hall, represented by his daughter, Laura Greavy.
I'm Laura Hall-Greavy, and I'm the eldest daughter of Dale Stanley Hall. He graduated from here in 1945. He and his wife, Dale and Faye, were married for 50 years. They had, much to their chagrin, 3 daughters instead of any sons. They have 8 grandchildren, and they had 9 great-grandchildren. Okay. One of their grandchildren did follow after my dad and came to West Point. He graduated in 2000. He's currently in Korea. He's a colonel. And that's why he's not here. He has a chair, but he's not here. And I would like to thank the Army Sports Hall of Fame Selection Committee, Bob Beretta, and our friend Colonel, he's retired Colonel Joseph Miller, who put my dad in, to be here. If I cry, I'm sorry. Okay. I said, when my dad was a little boy, he jumped out of a tree and he fractured his left arm, and he was left-handed. And he fractured it so badly that they told him it would not be functional any longer. His dad Victor Hall was an instructor of mechanical drawing at a local college, and this was during the Depression. And during the Depression, to make ends meet, he was the custodian for the entire college as well. He would take my dad, when my dad was little, he would take him every day when he cleaned up the gym over there, and he would make stations where my dad would have to go through and do different things so that he would be able to use his arm. And this has ramifications later. When he comes to West Point, you have to be able to stand like this. Okay, my dad's arm was like this. Okay, and he couldn't. And when we were going through Mom and Dad's stuff to write this, I had a letter that was from General MacArthur that said that if Dad came here, that they would do something about him not being able to put his arm down like this, okay? Which was very interesting. We found so many telegrams from famous people, it was kind of funny. Okay, my dad was very determined and very single-minded, and these were traits that would continue throughout his life. He worked hard at every task, and his hard work paid off for him because he eventually regained use of that arm. And he had to change. That's why his handwriting is so awful, because he had to change to his other hand. He became a star athlete in high school. And he made All-State in Kansas in football and basketball at Parsons High School as a junior and senior. He led the Southeast Kansas League in scoring in football and basketball for 3 seasons. And amazingly enough, in an era where they didn't have three-point stuff like that, his record is still there, which is kind of interesting for someone like him. Okay, he still holds the all-time Parsons High School career record. He scored 1,153 points. He had the football record for career scoring. He had 244 points, 35 touchdowns. He's the only Parsons, Kansas high school football player to ever have his number retired, and we actually found the jersey. Oops, surprise, surprise. Mom kept everything. She kept everything. He was inducted into the Kansas State High School Activities Hall of Fame in 1993, and he was inducted into the Kansas Sports Hall of Fame in 2004. Because of his prowess in athletics, they wanted him to come to West Point. And we found, like I said, multiple letters. We found letters from Ridgway, we found letters from MacArthur, and they were saying, and we didn't realize this either, but my dad had a thing for the Naval Academy as well. And MacArthur had written this thing saying, extolling the virtues of coming to West Point so that Dad would come to West Point. And it was funny, too, because MacArthur evidently followed my father for a while, because we would find things when Dad was coaching, MacArthur would write these letters that would tell him what to do, which was kind of interesting, too. My father's family had very limited resources. World War II was raging, and an appointment to the military academy would provide him with the means to obtain a college education, for him to acquire the skills that would help him during World War II, because they all knew that they were going to serve. And I found his thing. You know how you all know this. When you apply here, you have to say why you want to come here. Okay, well, I'd helped my son write his. Well, I found Dad's, and it was a hoot. So anyway, what they did with this stuff, and it also, here, I'll lose my place. And I told you that it also included the waiver saying that they would help him finance his trip to get here from Kansas by train, which was interesting, and that they would give him the dispensation so he could put his arms down. It said my dad was at West Point during the war years, which was 43, 44, and 45, because they were trying to crank them out so that they could get them out there. They only went 3 years at that time. My father was a 3-sport person. He was in football, basketball, and tennis. On the football team, he did play with the backfield with Glenn Davis and Doc Blanchard. He was on the 1944 football team that outscored their opponents 504-35 that season. They beat Notre Dame, the worst defeat Notre Dame has ever had, 59-0. That year that they played together, Glenn Davis scored 20 touchdowns. My dad had 13, and Doc Blanchard had 9. And there was one game that we read, this one was funny too. It said that Dad scored on 3 different touchdown plays, but they got called back for penalty. And then on the last play, they gave it to my dad, and he threw a touchdown to Doc Blanchard. So that's how they scored there. After my dad did his service, he did come back here. He was an assistant football coach in the 50s. And he succeeded Earl Blake as the head coach in 1959. This I shouldn't tell, but I will anyway. I found a letter. I found a letter in there from Westmoreland that came years after he had fired my father, and he said he apologized and that it had been a big mistake. And I said, and my mom had framed it. Boop. Okay, there it was. But anyway, it was quite interesting. My father truly excelled primarily at basketball. He led the 1943-44 Army team to a 15-0 record. He was named a Sporting News 5-man first team. We also found a record in there for him explaining why he couldn't play, because he was a first lieutenant and he had to do something else, and that was go to Germany. Anyway, he led the 44-45 team to a 14-1 victory. He had a 39-inch vertical leap, which for a little, he wasn't that big. My dad was like 5'11". And so anyway, he also lettered 3 years in tennis. And when he graduated in 1945, he was first in his class of more than 800 for athletic prowess. I'm almost done. Okay, in conclusion, and this is going to make me cry. It said, my father's decision to go to West Point made him the man he was his whole life. He said, at the United States Military Academy, this hardworking, determined man acquired the belief system, the skills, and the band of blood brothers that were with him. His whole life. Rafalco was in his class too. Anyway, and I've known those people their whole life, my whole life. I would once again like to thank you for honoring my dad and for including him in the Sports Hall of Fame. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Grivey. Next, Army's first All-American baseball player who hit at least .340 during each of his varsity seasons. From the class of 1964, Edward Joseph Haydash. Congratulations.
It looks big, but it's double, it's bolded, so I don't really mess it up. I am honored and humbled by my nomination, selection, and induction into the Army Sports Hall of Fame. And I offer my congratulations to the other inductees, and my thanks to the Athletic Department, Office of Communications, the Selection Committee, the USMA Athletic Committee, and the Academy Superintendent for their deliberation and approval of my induction. I want to thank my family and classmates who are present for the induction, and especially Dan Evans, John Murray, Dan Banovic, Terry Rusnak, and John Rogers, who initiated the process by submitting letters of support on my behalf. It is also a special honor to share the induction with 3 individuals already inducted. My teammate, Barry DeBolt, and my coaches, Eric the Red Tipton and Colonel Red Reeder. 54 years ago, we were lucky to complete an 18-game season, unlike teams from the South like Miami, who played upwards to 50. Today's Army plays in excess of 50 with multiple games against Navy. I mention this because having played only 18 games, it is important to recognize that my selection for All-American was the result of Tip and Red Reeder lobbying on my behalf with other coaches to get me the recognition. Although I performed well individually, the coaches worked overtime behind the scenes. That was true 54 years ago, and it's true today. My regret is that by the time I really fully appreciated what they had done for me, they had passed, and I was able to thank them personally. From the beginning, baseball gripped my soul. I was a very good baseball player, but despite how good I was, I won or lost with my teammates. This is especially so in team sports. There is no I in team. In baseball, one person does not win the ball game. Depending on what your teammates do determines what you do. You bunt, you hit and run and hit, sacrifice at your bat to advance the runner. Each member of the team is fighting for the same goal, to win the game. That is what makes athletics, intercollegiate or intramural, important. It is a lesson you carry forward after being commissioned. In wartime, what soldiers, airmen, sailors, and Marines really fight for is the man or woman beside them. You do not achieve success going it alone, and especially in our profession. Teamwork is essential. Without it, you lose. It is important to realize athletics is just one of many aspects of the academy life. West Point was not founded and is not in the business of producing professional athletes. Although athletics should not be the driving force for young men and women deciding to attend, I have to admit it was on my mind when I joined the Corps in 1960. As many will attest, I was not an ideal cadet. Athletics was my means to stay on Corps squad tables, avoid unwanted attention, and walking off punishment tours. I basically sat most of the time, which was ideal. It is ironic that this building is named after Jim Kimsey, who was my squad leader plebe year, and he, rightly so, being a bad cadet, made my time as a cadet less than enjoyable. You do not go through West Point without remembering it for the rest of your life. In 1960, it took 600-plus boys and made men of us. Simply stated, the growth process was painful. However, I would not trade the experience. I am reminded of a speech retired baseball coach John Scalinos gave at a conference of baseball coaches in 1996. It was entitled 17 Inches. Coach Scalinos was referring to the dimensions of a baseball home plate, 17 inches wide. He elaborated on the fact that the home plate dimensions are the same for Little League, Babe Ruth, high school, college, minor leagues, and major leagues. He then asked the audience what they thought they do, what was done with a big league pitcher who cannot throw the baseball over 17 inches. Do they widen the plate to allow him a better chance of hitting it? The answer was no. They send him home. Career is over. Do we hold ourselves accountable, or do we change the rules to fit us? Do we widen the home plate? Questions he asked. He concluded that if we fail to hold ourselves to a higher standard, a standard of what we know to be right, if we fail to hold our children to the same standards, if we are unwilling or unable to provide a consequence when they or others do not meet that standard, and if our schools, churches, and our government fail to hold themselves accountable to those they serve, there is only one thing to look forward to, and that's the abyss. West Point's home plate consists of our motto, duty, honor, country. Our honor code, a cadet will not lie, cheat, or steal, nor tolerate those who do, and our duty to choose the harder right rather than the easier wrong. They make West Point stand out above all other academic institutions. They are the rock foundation and cornerstone of this institution. Take them away, ignore them, or de-emphasize their importance because of political correctness or for any other reason, relegates West Point to being nothing more than another college or university. With few exceptions, it is unlikely a very gifted athlete with a chance at a professional career would choose to attend West Point. To attend knowing you are being trained, you attend knowing you are being trained to be an Army officer with superb leadership skills to lead men and women in peacetime and wartime. What is important is that the athletes, the members of the Corps, and all who decide to attend have intelligence, honesty, and integrity. Being gifted with athletic skills is just an added bonus. The Academy standards should not be compromised for any reason. We must be held accountable. The rules should not be changed to fit us. The West Point home plate must not be widened. If we fail to diminish the ideals that define this institution, then it becomes, again, nothing more than another institution. I thank you again for the honor you have bestowed upon me and my fellow inductees, and let's beat Navy and all our athletic opponents.
Thank you. Next, from the class of 1967, a swimmer who established 27 academy or pool records during his time as a cadet, Kerry Lee OHara.
Receiving this Hall of Fame honor has been an end to my quandary. As an athlete, as so many of you in the audience can probably identify with, we had control over achieving our goals when we were competing. We trained well, we listened to our coach, we ate the right things, we got the right sleep. We had control. But this Hall of Fame status, we have no control. All we have is we just wait and hope that someday we'll be recognized. That wait ended for me a few months ago when Boo called me at home. My wife answered and said that I was unavailable. Boo, I've got to confess something. I was taking my nap. 20 years from now, when you're my age, you'll understand what I'm talking about. Anyway, Boo said to have him call me back and make sure you tell him that it was not about donations, which is probably a good thing to say. So I did call him back. I'd like to speak briefly about and give tribute to the Hall of Fame Selection Committee. They have one tough job. The quantity and the quality of people that they have to select from is enormous. The competition is fierce. I'm an example. Here I am, four-time All-American, and yet in the class of 67, which is a member of my class, there were 3 people, justifiably so, elected the Hall of Fame ahead of me. Just in swimming alone, there have been numerous outstanding West Point athletes. From the years 64 through 67, when I competed, we had a total of 12 All-Americans on the team at that one time. Can you imagine a coach having 12 All-Americans at one time nowadays? It's amazing. So my hat's off to the selection committee. They have quite a challenge. I was fortunate to swim during an era that I did in the 60s. Now swimmers must be big. You can see I lowered the podium, by the way, or the microphone. I was 5'7" and weighed 135 pounds when I competed. Now I'm 5'6". Boo, that's another thing to look forward to 20 years from now. Shrinking. Look at the evolution of swimmers. I'll use some superstars as an example. Don Schollander. Some of you may remember Don Schollander. He competed during my era. 4 gold medals, the Sullivan Award. Don was 5'10". Bringing it up a little closer to the time, Mark Spitz, next superstar swimmer. Probably more of you recognize Mark Spitz. 7 gold medals during one Olympics. Mark was 6 foot tall. Let's bring it to the current day. Everyone knows Michael Phelps. 6'4", size 14 shoe. As you can see the pattern here. Even the ladies, Katie Ledecky, last Olympics, 5 gold medals, 6 foot tall. Her teammate, Missy Franklin, 6'2". I think the days of small people like me are gone for being swimmers. I believe it is a common figure of speech to say that I'm humbled by being selected with the Hall of Fame. But I have a different way of looking at it. For the last 14 years, I've been humbled by having athletes far better than me be selected to this. Today, I am not humbled, I am honored. So today I want to thank a few people that helped me get here. Of course, those anonymous people from the selection committee, thank you. Those who nominated me, we have HAP trainer Tommy Dyer, Buddy Buca, and the Friends of Army Swimming and Diving. Jack Ryan, my former coach, who's a member of the Hall of Fame. And my plebe coach, Buck Hiles. Buck isn't here tonight, but he was an All-American, and he was a Florida State Hall of Famer. He was an enlisted man. A lot of the coaches back in my era were enlisted people. They drafted, they said, go to Vietnam or come to West Point, and they think about it, and I'll go to West Point, I guess, and coach. But they had a lot of great coaches back then. But Buck would probably share with you a quick story, which I'll share with you tonight if you were here. And that was in the barracks, he and a bunch of other enlisted coaches threw Bobby Knight out of the second floor window into the snow one day. But that's another story. My parents, who were dedicated to my development. That I broke my first national record at age 10 is a tribute to them. My older brother, Tim, class of '65, also a backstroker, for inadvertently setting goals for me because I tried to beat him all the time as I was growing up. Those are my goals. Thank you, Boo, again, for calling me directly. I think that's a class act when the athletic director takes the time out and calls personally rather than delegating it to somebody else or writing a letter. Thank you, Boo. My teammates who encouraged me and inspired me. My roommates and classmates who supported me, especially those that are waiting over in Eisenhower Hall tonight. I really appreciate that. And finally, I thank you for being here and listening to me.
Thanks. Next up, a volleyball standout who is part of 2 Patriot League championship teams from the class of 1994, Aleta Simone Powell.
Good evening, everyone. I have been afforded the opportunity to speak again tonight, so I'm just going to keep my comments really short right now and give our last inductees an opportunity to speak. The opposite of Mr. O'Hare here, I was very, very surprised when I got the call from Boo, in the sense that I wasn't looking to ever be honored in any way. When I played my 4 years here at West Point, it was just fun. And it was just, I had great coaches, I had great teammates. I just loved volleyball, and I had a staff that trained me in such a way. I mean, you know, Bob Gambardella, everyone knows his era. He worked with the Olympic coaches. We had the Olympic team come here and play China here in Crystal Arena. It was just where I could just work as hard as I could. I didn't think I could do what they asked me to do, but they were able to make me do it. So when you called me, I was like, how'd this happen? You know? And I said, let me go look and see where are these stats. And I didn't even know I had all those records. You know, I was like, this is great. So I'll save most of my comments for later, but I'm just grateful to be here. And I'm humbled to hear, you know, what everyone else is sharing. I mean, it's incredible athletes and incredible times, and I'm just excited and very grateful. So thank you. Beat Navy.
Thank you. Next, from the class of 1945, a 7-time letter winner who was a part of Army's 1944 National Championship team, who later went on to a distinguished military career, Edmund Anthony Rafalco, represented by his daughter, Christine Rafalco.
Thank you very much for that introduction. It's a privilege and my great pleasure to accept this distinction on behalf of my father, Edmund Anthony Rafalco, and my family, especially my mother. Here today to celebrate this singular honor are my sister Celia and her husband Rick, my sister Madeline, her husband Sam, my brother Edmund, my niece Michelle and her son Cooper, my nephew Christopher and his daughter Abigail, and my Uncle Joe and Joseph Terrell and Aunt Bonnie. My father would be very humbled and delighted to be so acknowledged by his alma mater. He was very modest, and growing up when we were young, we did not appreciate the significance of an undefeated season or of a national championship team. It wasn't until much later that we came to understand what his accomplishments were and how singularly unique his set of experiences really is. His teammates and others certainly understood it. Sorry. The Army A Club has done a great job in summarizing my father's Hall of Fame credentials, so what I would like to share with you are a few personal thoughts. When I first came to New York 34 years ago, several of his classmates, teammates, company mates were living in the area and graciously welcomed me. The typical introduction to others would go something like this. Let me introduce Christine. Her father had 5 blocks and 3 touchdowns in the Notre Dame game. And so it went. But my father admired abilities in others, no matter their sport or their achievements. He was strategic. What did it take to achieve the mission, the victory? He particularly applauded those who were clutch, those who delivered against tall odds, whether on the fields of friendly strife or elsewhere. His comments about the grit Wall Street demonstrated when the New York Stock Exchange opened the Monday after 9/11 will stay with me always. Another characteristic of my father's was that somehow he would find a connection with everyone in the room. For example, in addition to being classmate, teammate, company mate of Dale Hall, two other fellow inductees, Kerry and here, played for Army in swimming, diving, and baseball when my father was director of athletics at the Air Force Academy. In the last few years of his life, my father began writing what he called Rafe's Recollections, recounting his life and career. It should come as no surprise that his enthusiasm comes through most strongly in the sections recounting his athletic pursuits, especially during his time as a West Point cadet. He recounts games, scores, strategies, how he came to meet many people. Among these recollections is a time when my father, Dale Hall, and Doug Kenna met and played a very strategic game. They became lifelong friends after that. So this induction unites them again in a very special way, and they would be thrilled. My father is likely to be one of the very few West Point graduates to achieve 3 Navy wins at the varsity level the same academic year in football, basketball, and baseball, 1944 to 1945. The scores were 23-7 in football, 50-48 in basketball, and baseball 7-2. That year, his teams were undefeated in football, won 14 of 15 basketball games, and were the only Army baseball team to defeat not one, but 2 professional baseball teams, the Montreal Royals 12-8, and the Brooklyn Dodgers twice, 5-4 and 4-0. He was playing either first base or in right field. Now, what's interesting about this is that many years later, maybe 50 years later, at a reunion, my father and some of his baseball teammates were discussing their loss to the Yankees. What prevented the victory and what caused the loss? A bystander listening to that conversation might have thought the game was played that afternoon. If he were to share his best moments as an Army athlete, my guess is they would be as starting end on the 1944 championship team, the plebe year varsity letters in each of these sports, how the plebes on the basketball team, Dale Hall, Doug Kenna, Ekberg, Damon, and Rafalco regularly won scrimmages against their upperclassmen, and of course the wins over the professional baseball players. But most likely among his proudest achievements might be those wins over Navy in the same year. As I mentioned earlier, my Uncle Joe is here tonight, and he was a great admirer of my father and was actually aware of my father's sports prowess before Mother ever met him. Uncle Joe shared with me recently what my father said to him the last time they spoke. Maybe it was because Uncle Joe is a Marine, or that his grandson is a Naval Academy graduate and basketball player, but I don't think so. I think it came from the heart. Go Army, beat Navy. So thank you all very, very much. I appreciate it, and everyone being here and the guests waiting for us at dinner, but he would be delighted. Thank you very much.
Next up, the first female administrator to be inducted into the Army Sports Hall of Fame, who served the Sports Information Department for more than 50 years, Madeline Joan Salvani.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, my fellow inductees. I would like to thank Bob Aleta and the members of the Hall of Fame Committee, Boo Corrigan, Army's Director of Athletics, along with Superintendent Lieutenant General Darrell Williams, for allowing me to be part of today's ceremony. This is a special honor for myself and my fellow inductees. I have been involved with the Hall of Fame since the very beginning. from researching the athletes, then helping provide video for those selected each year. It's always been an exciting time as I've either covered or watched many of the athletes competing. Every year I look forward to the list of inductees and see how many I knew. One year I saw everyone compete except one. Many times it felt like Christmas morning when I rush over to this room and wait for the honorees to enter. So I was rather stunned when Boo Corrigan told me I'd be part of this year's class. My first thought was, you're kidding, right? Because I know the history, and to be included in such a distinctive group seemed impossible. Not once did I ever think this would happen to me. Of this year's class, I saw George Schlabach compete in lacrosse for Dick Adele, Aleta Powell, who played volleyball for Bob Gambardella, baseball star Ed Haydash, who competed for Coach Eric Tipton, Kerry OHara, who swam for Coach Jack Ryan. I had a working relationship with each of those coaches. But though I did not see Dale Hall or Ed Rafalco compete, their names well known in Army athletics. It is kind of ironic that when I became part of ODIA over 50 years ago, I was hoping somebody would say I don't look that old, women were not permitted in the press box, and the credential said, no women or children allowed. The only place I ever saw women in the press box back then was in Philadelphia for Army-Navy, when the women were the teletypers for the press corps. That part of history has changed. Women joined the Corps Cadets back in 1976, and I was so excited that year, basketball was the first team to compete. Not everyone was receptive when women came, but I felt that basketball helped earn them acceptance within the Corps. As the game was played 4 o'clock in the central gym, and the cadets would walk through that area on their way to getting ready for dinner hour. Many times they stopped to watch and cheer the players on. They were first called sugar smacks. Smack is another word for plebe, and sugar because they were of the female species. So the cadets, you would hear the cheering as they would cheer on the sugar smacks. West Point has a saying that much of the history we teach was made by the people we taught. I have been able to be part of history, not only with women's sports, but all sports, and it's been a great run. I traveled to Japan with men's basketball for the Suntory Bowl, where David Robinson and Kevin Houston battled each other. I went to Ireland with football, along with a trip to Hawaii, and have been fortunate to be at every bowl game Army has played in. Women's basketball took me to Alaska and to several NCAA tournaments, the first at the Division II level when the team reached the Sweet 16. I've also been involved in NCAA postseason competition for gymnastics, women's soccer, softball, baseball, rifle, pistol, swimming, volleyball, to name a few. Over the years, I was involved in covering a majority of Army sports, but honestly didn't understand many of them. For several years, I typed play-by-play for football. In the beginning, didn't really understand the game. But I listened to my callers and learned the game, not only well enough to type in the information, but also fill in a time for coverage of JV football and split football, both stats and stories, back in the days. The most rewarding part of the game and what made it so unique were the players. I was able to get to know them on road trips and home games and still hear from many of them. I've always felt that athletes are a special breed. I am very fortunate where my life has taken me. It was a long time ago that I started at West Point as an 18-year-old who didn't really understand Army lingo. It's been a lot of hard work, but also a lot of fun. In summation, I just want to salute the inductees, my family and friends, who came here with me today, along with the administration. And I have to have a special thanks to my coworkers, both past and present, for helping guide and making me a better person and writer. One of the times when we were competing against Kentucky in rifle, and I didn't bother to look up the nickname. Back then, it was in a book, not on Google. So I remember Mike Albright and Bob Beretta asking me if rifle had a different nickname than Kentucky's other sports. See, I call them the Colonels, and they are the Wildcats. You learn from your mistakes. Again, thank you, and I hope you don't mind me ending with, go Army, beat Navy, because I hate losing to the Mids.
And last but not least, a four-time All-American in lacrosse and named the nation's top goalkeeper from the class of 1984, George John Schlabach.
Good evening. I can tell you that getting that phone call from Boo is beyond surreal. I think my exact words to you, Boo, were, "I'm shaking." And you said, "Just listen. I'll tell you what's going on." I was fortunate enough to have been here last year for our late Coach Adele as he was inducted. I know what it means. I'm honored. I'm humbled. I'm still shaking and will continue for the rest of my life. I prepared some notes and I'm off them totally right now, so I'm just going to continue and try to get us on schedule here, okay? To my teammates, I played for two Hall of Fame lacrosse coaches that hang in this hall, and it's an honor to me. To my teammates, you stole my comments earlier from our conversation, and that's okay. It's not about one person. I was a goalie. It's about the team. It's about everybody supporting each other. To the three guys in the back right now, Tony, Frankie, JC, I love you, brothers. Always will. My biggest regret for today is that Mom and Dad aren't here. My folks were so instrumental in my life in supporting me athletically. My dad, the last time I saw him, told me the best 4 years of his life were the time we spent here. Lastly, to my wife of 34 years. Enjoy this, sweetheart. You were here for the whole thing. I love you dearly. To my family, thank you. To the Academy and the Hall of Fame, I'm forever indebted. Thank you very much.
One more time, a round of applause for the Army Sports Hall of Fame class of 2018. Tonight's ceremony, the official party, we asked to remain for a photo session. Each inductee, of course, will be mailed a CD with professional photos from this session. Are we ready? The Army Sports Hall of Fame class of 2018. There we go.